May the 11th, 2010, cars sweep into Downing Street as the 43-year-old David Cameron becomes the youngest Prime Minister since Lord Liverpool in 1812.
I believe deeply in public service. And I think the service our country needs right now is to face up to our really big challenges, to confront our problems, to take difficult decisions, to lead people through those difficult decisions so that together we can reach better times ahead.
No talk of a new dawn or new Britain, but palpable relief that 5 days of inter-party talks have delivered a government. After 13 years in the cold, the Conservatives are back in number 10. Difficult decisions. He wasn't kidding either. This has been a parliament of deep austerity, 9% cuts in departmental spending already, and whoever wins tomorrow, more to come. All necessary, according to Cameron and his Chancellor George Osborne, to achieve fiscal stability and lay the groundwork for economic recovery. It's been hard-pounding every step of the way.
In a way, one of the most remarkable things is that the David Cameron who's Prime Minister now is very similar to the David Cameron who became elected as a Member of Parliament in 2001. I suppose the biggest change, though, during the time that he's been Prime Minister is that there's been an extra steeliness that's entered his soul. I think that having to take the sorts of decisions a Prime Minister has to take, indeed having to deal with the disciplines of a coalition government, you do develop that additional extra capacity, that extra sort of ferrous content.
But even if Cameron's character is mostly unaltered, everything else has changed. Let's start with his own political project. When he first became leader of the Conservative Party in 2005, his priorities were radically different. As a self-declared moderniser, he wanted his party to blaze a trail in social reform.
For some, the hoodie represents all that's wrong about youth culture in Britain today. But for me, adult society's response to the hoodie shows how far we are from finding the long-term answers to putting things right. This is the big society made real, devolving power to the people while using the state to encourage social action and to help the poorest. I think it matters, and I think it means something, whether you're a man and a woman, or a woman and a woman, or a man and another man. And I am proud that we supported civil partnerships.
Context, of course, is all. This was before the global financial crash, before the bank bailout, and before the fiscal deficit became the focus of political combat. Cuddly was out, cuts were in, and the axe was about to fall here in the Treasury, as Cameron made abruptly, starkly clear.
The age of irresponsibility is giving way to an age of austerity.
It was one of the most striking examples of political shape-shifting in modern times. No more the gentle social reformer, Cameron was now the stern economic repairman, knocking on the door of the British state to declare the party over. But had he gone too far?
The reality of the Great Recession and its aftermath has meant there was no money left, and therefore, in one or two areas, we've had to make sure that our ambitions were in line with the reality. And that meant that, for example, the degree of investment in public services that David would hope to ensure that we could give in the next 5 years wasn't always there.
But there was another force driving Cameron away from his compassionate beginnings.
Cheers.
A reactionary right party that had been a joke for years, but pretty suddenly had become a nightmare for the Tory Prime Minister.
It's Desperate Dave, isn't it? Desperate Dave saying to these voters that have left him over the course of the last 5 years, please come home, I think is the phrase he uses. They're not going back.
I mean, there are some people who've decided that they want to vote UKIP and have a very different worldview from David Cameron. And those voters probably aren't people who can be won back. There are other people who went to UKIP because they felt that the government wasn't in touch with their economic plight. So I think it's wrong to assume that everybody who's in the UKIP column is sort of an ideologically coherent UKIpper. Not all of them are.
Cameron had started life on the centre ground, but now he feared that he was hemorrhaging support to the right. And in January 2013, the rise of UKIP drove Cameron to take the greatest gamble of his political career, a pledge to hold a referendum on Britain's membership of the EU.
I am in favour of having a referendum. I believe in confronting this issue, shaping it, leading the debate, not simply hoping that a difficult situation will go away.
Of course, some people thought that Cameron's changed agenda was not the result of outside pressures at all, but an unmasking, his true political identity as a leader of the Nasty Party revealing itself now that he was in office.
David Cameron is a brilliant public relations executive, and I don't think anyone would want to take that away from him. But when it comes to someone with values, someone who puts British families and their aspirations and concerns at the heart of his politics, when someone who has a sort of vision like Keith Joseph or Margaret Thatcher or Neil Kinnock or Ed Miliband or Tony Blair, he's just not at the races.
Right, okay. Hold on, there we are, you got it. Right.
The dominant theme of Cameron's plea for re-election has been absolutely straightforward. He promises economic competence in contrast to Labour chaos. The original plan was clear enough. By now, austerity would be over and the Tories would be reaping the electoral rewards. But, well, it didn't quite work out like that.
The big question lots of voters have is about the economy, and that's the question that he has to answer. The economic recovery has been, if we believe the opinion polls, voteless for the Conservatives, and the reason it has is because though most voters now accept that the country's economy has turned the corner and is strengthening, they're not feeling it yet, and so the question becomes one of faith and trust.
The Tories have tried to frame the election as a referendum on trajectory, are we heading in the right direction, and a vote on character, is Cameron still the best available candidate for the job? He's often seen as the chillaxing Prime Minister, a natural fit for no-drama Obama, the president with whom he quickly bonded.
Prime Minister Cameron, talk to me. This is your first time being at
Very first time at a basketball game.
What do you make of the experience so far?
I'm enjoying it. It's fast, it's pretty fast and furious. It's hard to follow sometimes exactly who's done what wrong.
Was our president helping you follow the game?
He was giving me some tips.
And he's going to teach me cricket.
Yeah.
But the public jollity was matched by seriousness in private when it came to the big decisions on foreign and military policy.
He's a very decisive man. He is very courteous with people, even when he quite clearly doesn't agree with them. Was he prepared for the rigours and challenges of what is arguably the Prime Minister's most important task in leading us and leading people into war? I think it probably took him by surprise, but he fell into the requirement more easily than I suspect many do, and took it very seriously.
In 2011, the Prime Minister became convinced that he would have to intervene in Libya to stop Colonel Gaddafi's slaughter of civilians. The US President took more persuading, but in March it seemed to Cameron that there was a risk of outright massacre in Benghazi. At last, Obama was brought on board and airstrikes began. Whether or not the intervention has left Libya better off, it showed Cameron was more than the risk-averse pragmatist of caricature, and he was bitterly disappointed 2 years later when the Commons blocked his plan to take military action against President Assad's regime in Syria.
I don't know what the Prime Minister's biggest regret is, but I suspect that Syria is an issue that we will all be talking about into our old age, wondering if we could have done more when it was easier. And the longer it's been left, the more difficult and intractable it's become, the more ISIS has grown as a threat, and the more of a challenge it is to get rid of them. And I suspect if we act decisively, early and robustly is a good rule of war.
In office, Cameron has had to play with the hard hand he was dealt and not enact the social agenda that captivated him first. Now, if he holds on to power, he has to lead the country into the post-austerity era. What challenges does the Conservative Party face in getting its message across and broadening its appeal?
It's difficult always to look at yourself, look at your party through another person's eyes. And I think they don't understand the extent to which the perception people have of the values of the Conservative Party puts them off being able to vote for it, and therefore that we need to address those things if we're going to broaden the appeal of the Conservative Party and ensure that in future it can win majorities.
These have been 5 very difficult years for this country, and the difficult decisions, that's cuts to you and me, are far from over. If on May the 27th, when the Queen delivers her speech, David Cameron is still working here in Downing Street, it would almost certainly be at the helm of a minority government. Does he have what it takes to hold together Whitehall for another 5 years without a Commons majority? And do we have the patience to let him try? And does he want to face 2 years of mayhem over the European referendum? For David Cameron, remarkably, the hard yards may just be starting.